The number one question that I get asked on an almost daily basis is about the state of the market, and not only where we are now, but where we are going. So in today's video, we're going to recap what happened over the month of March and what is going to happen not only in April, but beyond. If you don't already know, my name is Nick Deckard. I am a local real estate agent here in Ocean City, New Jersey. If you want to be the first to know about everything happening here in the real estate market, specifically in Ocean City, not this national news jargon that you hear, which can be incredibly misleading, make sure you hit subscribe down below and turn on the notification bell because I come out with videos at least once a week, each and every week, specifically about real estate here in town. With that out of the way, let's dive right in. All right, so of course, I'm having some issues getting everything to share appropriately when I'm in presentation mode. So let's just take a look at the slides like this. Now, the biggest change here that is factoring into absolutely nothing so far, but may coming up, is what is happening with the mortgage rates. So we ended 2021 at about 3.1% here for single family homes, second homes, and some condos. Now, things have crept up consistently through both January and February, but in March, we took a gigantic leap after the Fed news came out to the point where we're up around or above 4.5% for a conforming conventional loan, not a jumbo loan. We can touch on that in a separate video. And that's just for single families. For condos, that's usually about 3/4 of a point above. So that's an additional 0.75. There's a chance you're looking at north of a 5% mortgage rate for a second home here in town. Now, that is only likely to go up from this point through the month of April. So that's something that is going to be very impactful for a lot of people. But at the same time, the fact that we're still looking at about 50% of all deals being in cash, that's also not going to affect a lot of people. So it's one thing to keep that in the back of your mind, but let's talk about the other points here about what has changed. So inventory is a hot topic and has been for quite some time. Now, it's one of my biggest pet peeves when I see people out there giving their opinions about what is going to happen with the market, what's overpriced, what's crazy, and what's not. This market is unique, and it's something that none of us have ever seen. But for those of us who live, eat, and breathe this stuff day in and day out, I know personally I've gotten a sense, a real feel for how things are going and where they're going to go based on what's happening. And inventory is going to be one of the driving factors for that. At this time, I thought we would be about 225 properties out there on the active market. Come March, as we trickle into April, is usually the peak of when we see inventory hit and stay on the market here in Ocean City. But in fact, we were actually up a little bit. Over a couple weeks in March, we did crack that 200 property point. We're now back down to 193. So with that peak period partially done with and still a little bit to come over the coming weeks, I don't anticipate that we're going to see a whole lot of inventory coming. So for all of the people out there that say the inventory is coming, the foreclosure crisis is going to hit, they don't know what they're talking about. This is the new norm. For a lot of people who have sat on the sidelines for a year or so waiting for things to normalize or die down, you're now looking at being at least 18% in the hole if you were buying a condo and 30% in the hole if you're buying a single family home. That's how much year over year from last March until this March, prices have increased. And the bad news for a lot of people looking to buy, it's great news if you're already an owner, that's not going to slow down anytime soon. That inventory is still going to be a choke point for what prices are going to do. Now, there are properties in different categories, again, that may be impacted more than others when it comes to this increase in interest rates and mortgage rates specifically. But for the time being, that's the market that we're coming from. Now, where are we? Let's take a look specifically at pending and closed sales to give us an indication of where we are likely to head going forward as well. What I want to draw your attention towards here, pending sales, is just everything that has gone under contract in the month, specifically the one that we're talking about. So March in this case. So in March, we had 84 properties go under contract. Now, I like to look back to 2019, the last time that we had a normal market in most people's eyes. We had 103 properties go under. Obviously, 2020, aberration there. We're going to ignore that. 2021 was extremely hot, again at 104. The fact that we are 20 properties lower, you might be thinking to yourself, oh, yes, things are slowing down. What I want you to know is not only here in 2021, we were over 300 properties on the market. Back in 2019, we were over 400 properties on the market. So the fact that we are keeping up this pace with such little inventory sitting on the market is incredible. And that shows just how strong the demand is. Moving on to closed sales, again, it's going to reflect exactly that. Back in March of 2019, we had 64 closed. Here we are with 71 closed. We're still right there on pace. Again, 2021 was an incredibly strong year with a third more inventory. So if you want to up this by a third, we are almost identical to the activity level that we had last year. So what does that all mean? Now, we talk about months of inventory to help gauge what's a balanced market and what's not. There's another statistics that I'm working on that I'll call velocity. That's not quite ready yet. I want to have a couple more months history to be able to really talk to it in a way that you'll be able to comprehend and really grasp. But with where we are now, we're at about 4.5 months of inventory. 6 months is what's considered a balance. This is just single family homes. Condos are a totally different animal. So single families are sitting out there longer. The churn rate is not quite as high. One of the main reasons for that is the single family market right now is flush with high-end new construction properties, especially ones that are early on in the process. They typically don't go under contract until later on down the road. So I do expect this to be about as high as we go for the time being. And you'll see that despite being in a nearly balanced market per the stats, prices are still increasing very, very consistently on a monthly basis, to the point where we are now looking at a median sales price of $1.3 million. Now, as far as the days on market, we do see a little blip up here. Now, don't get too excited because we're looking at about a day and a half, which means nothing in the long term. This is a blip to me. It's not slowing down at all. Now, skipped one there. If we come back to our inventory on condos and townhomes, I kept the scale the same. Normally when I present these charts and graphs, I like to pretty it up, change the scale, but that 6 months of inventory is important because again, that's where we strike balance. We've been so far out of balance in the condo market and we're not improving at all. We're actually getting a little bit worse over the last few months. And that's because again, the inventory that does come is getting gobbled up so quickly that the supply simply can't keep up. Now, that is partially reflected in the increasing prices. Again, we started to level out here a little bit. We took another blip up. I would not be concerned. And again, I'm not looking at this saying, hey, we're hitting a balanced market. Great. Again, this inventory number points to the total opposite. It's simply that, in my opinion, again, we have a polarized market. And I'm going to talk about this in a couple slides here, about having a lot of high-end condos, a lot of low-end condos, really nothing towards that median price point in the 700,000 range. So things get a little bit wonky. They'll jump. There'll be more variance to it. But again, days on market, still going down for condos. It is a very, very hot commodity. Now, what you've all been waiting for is what's going to happen next. So again, we're going to take this one piece at a time. And I did not update this right beforehand, but mortgage rates, again, we jumped from 3 to 3.5 during the month of January, up to 4 in February, and we're up to really 4.5 plus now in March. So I do expect for us to be between 4.5 and 5% by the end of the month of April. Now, there are geopolitical issues at play with Russia and Ukraine. There's the monetary easing policy. There's a lot of things that can change this for better or for worse. But all else equal, if there are no huge curveballs, that's what I would expect to happen. Now, one other point on mortgage rates I want to talk about. One of the big bumps here, and the reason for the big bump, effective especially April 1st here, and I did talk about this last week, would be the change in the structure of second home mortgages, where there's an additional fee that is being charged by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac for conforming loans. Conforming loans are anything under about $660,000 in terms of the mortgage, not the sale price of your house. The mortgage that you're getting, if it's under $660,000, more likely than not, you have a conforming loan. It's going to get sold on to the government. There are a lot of requirements that come with that. They're basically taking the Robin Hood approach of saying, hey, for you guys who can afford a second home, we're going to get a little bit more out of you here to help fund our first-time home buyer programs and others like that, which I understand why they're doing that. Hopefully they decide to change their mind and roll that back. But for now, it actually makes more sense for the next 2 weeks to increase your price range or change your financing arrangement to go for a jumbo loan. The best current rate I know of is 2.875%. And I've had a couple buyers who have looked at this. We've done the math. And based on the price point they started at, it would actually be more expensive for them to purchase a less expensive property. That doesn't make any sense. It should not be that way, but that's where we are. So it's important to know that that is a loophole that kind of exists right now for the next 2 weeks. If you want to talk specifics about that, just reach out to me. I'm happy to talk you through it because it can get complicated. Now, inventory. Again, we did have a pickup in March where we popped above 200 total properties. We're now back down to 193. Now, what I expect to happen over the next couple weeks, we'll still see a high rate of inventory coming each and every week between probably 25 and 30 properties. Mid-April on to the end of April, I do expect that to start to slow down. The reason, if you think about this logically, why this is the hottest time in the market here in Ocean City, people want to be in before Memorial Day, whether that's for personal use, whether that's for rental use. That's when you want to be locked in, set up, and comfortable. Now, if we're looking at a 45-day close here in the beginning of April, that would put us in mid-May. There's still time. Once we get to halfway through April, you're really pushing the limit on getting a 30 to 35-day close. It can still be done, but it's tight. And make sure that you are closed by Memorial Day. So that's why it slows down in the back half of April. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next 2 weeks. But again, I do expect things to slow down on both the supply and demand side a bit. Do not read into that. The market's going to shift. There are always people buying here in town. But the people who are selling, they know that this is now the time. So as far as prices, as we talked about, single family homes keep going up. Condo prices did pick back up again this month. And this polarized inventory concept of having a lot of high-end options and low-end options in the condo market, not a whole lot of middle ground. The single family market is even more egregious, and it is so heavily weighted towards the luxury market, the high end. There is nothing really sub $1 million to even look at. So it's going to be interesting to see how the stats start to shake out. And again, I'm a big believer in the data and the numbers, but there's always context. So I want to do my best to fill in the gaps and explain exactly what's happening here as I am your boots on the ground. So I do expect prices to keep going up throughout 2022, especially this summer. The fall, once that happens, that's going to be a different animal entirely because there's so much that can change between now and then. But I am looking like I'm going to be on the low end as of now. When I predicted 10% appreciation in 2022, it's looking and tracking more like 15% across the board at this point. So days on market, last but not least, it's going to stay about where it is, might creep a little bit lower simply because there's not a whole lot of options for where it can go. It's not going to go skyrocketing unless there's an economic collapse and people decide they don't even want to escape here to the beach. So if you are thinking about pulling the trigger and jumping into the market, you are running out of time. I want to be completely frank with you on that. Prices are only going to get more competitive over the next month or two. Come the summer, there are going to be options. Inventory always does come. It's just limited. And on top of that, it's very hard to get in. Usually a lot of those properties that go up are rental properties. You can only come down on Saturdays during changeover to see it. And then there is the complexity too of even if you decide you want to buy one in June, you may not be able to step foot in it really until September, maybe even October, depending on what weeks they have rented out. So this is something that, again, I highly encourage you, if you're thinking about this, give me a call, give me a text message, whatever is most comfortable for you. I'm happy to talk you through this. I've helped now coming up on 10 families over the past few months to navigate this chaos. And it's what I love to do. And if you talk to anybody that I've worked with, if you're watching this because somebody sent this video to you, they'll tell you that I don't push for anything. I can say with confidence, I've talked more people out of buying certain properties than I have ever talked anybody into buying anything. And I take pride in that. I'm going to give it to you straight and narrow and make sure that you are making the best possible decision for you and your family and taking the big picture into consideration. So if you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out. You can always drop them right down in the comments as well. But as always, I appreciate you spending some time with me today learning about the market here in Ocean City. I will see you on the next video.